When it comes to the update and forecast for the California wildfires, I thought I would do a live stream today because there's some new information in the weather forecast I wanted to get out as soon as possible. Now, as always, we will be going over some of our individual fires towards the end of this video, but I want to spend the majority of our time today really diving into the weather forecast as some dangerous wildfire conditions are building in right now and lasting through Friday. So that's going to be the main thing we're talking about right now, the red flag warning that is over the majority of Northern California. So we'll start off this forecast just looking at the satellite imagery. And as you can see, California looks about as good as it has looked in possibly 2 months since the wildfire season kicked off on August 17th. You can see there is a little bit of smoke coming up from the Creek Fire and the Castle Fire here, but for the most part, the air in California is looking great right now. And what I'm hoping is it stays that way. So as I said, there are some dangerous wildfire conditions building in right now and lasting through Friday. So really the main worry right now is that we could have some new fires starting, and with some of our old fires that had calmed down with the favorable weekend conditions, I'm afraid some of those might actually flare back up again. So without further ado, let's get into the weather forecast. And how we're going to do that is look at the same 3 variables we do in every single video, the 3 variables that affect wildfire: temperature, winds, and humidity. And if this is the first time you've watched one of my videos, I'll just go over real quickly why these 3 variables are important. Temperature is an easy one. The warmer it is, the worse wildfire is going to be. When it comes to humidity, the drier it is, the worse wildfire is going to be. That makes sense because if the air is dry, then the vegetation gets dry, and then it's easier for fires to spread. If you don't understand that, think of a campfire. If you're trying to start a fire with a dry log or a moist log, it probably makes sense to you that it's much easier to start the fire with the dry log, and then it's going to burn much hotter. Now, winds are important for 2 reasons. One, winds can just outright spread a fire. They can push the flame forward, but they can also actually pick up burning embers and throw them ahead of the fire, which is called spotting. And then those little burning embers that got spotted can then start new fires, and that's when we really see some rapid wildfire growth. And as I said, when it comes to all 3 of these variables, temperature, winds, and humidity, they're trending in the wrong direction this week, and they're honestly not looking too good. So we'll start with temperature here. You can see the highs today are going to be in the high 80s to low 90s. Now, when we look at Thursday, that's when we're going to be into the mid 90s. And unfortunately, the forecast for Friday is looking worse than it did yesterday. Those mid 90 to possibly high 90 temperatures are going to be sticking around through Friday. So, to put this into perspective, that 1 week, about a week or 2 ago, when the Zogg fire and the Glass fire both blew up overnight and grew 40,000 acres, throughout that week we had some triple-digit temperatures, sometimes into the 105, 106 range. So comparatively, these temperatures aren't terrible, but they're still much more than we'd like to see, especially when we're in wildfire season. Now, the next thing I'm worried about is the humidity. And I'll remind you, over the weekend, humidity was great. It went up to 80 to 90%, and that really helped to calm all our fires down, and it even put out some of our major fires. And unfortunately, you can see right now that dry air has returned to California. And I hate to say it, but we're going to be actually getting drier throughout the day today, dropping back into the teens. And one other thing I'll point out is we're actually going to stay dry overnight. Now, the reason that's important is because typically in the overnight hours, you get up to maybe 70 or 80% humidity, and that allows your fires to calm down. Any fires that did start, the firefighters can really attack it at nighttime when you get higher humidity. But as you can see, humidity is staying extremely low even throughout the nighttime hours when it should be high. Now, like I said, Thursday is not looking too good, temperature-wise and humidity-wise. We're going to be dropping into the low teens, and I would say if I'm worried about any of the days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Thursday is probably the day I'm the most worried about. As you can see, super dry air over all of California. maybe even getting into the single digits in some places. And just like tonight, a lot of that dry air is going to be hanging around during the nighttime hours. Now Friday, like I said, the forecast for Friday is actually looking worse than it was showing yesterday. You can see Friday we're going to be back into the low teens, maybe even single digits. So Friday is certainly something to worry about as well, although the wind gusts do look a little better for Friday. So that's why I'm mostly worried about Thursday. So I guess we actually will just get into the wind gusts now, and you can see that as of right now, they have already started to build in. If we just click on this map, we can see what they are. Already gusting at about 30 to 35 miles per hour, pushing down from Reading through Napa. And I hate to say it, but that's only the start of it. Over the next 3 days, these wind gusts are actually going to be increasing, possibly reaching speeds up to 50-55 miles per hour. So you can see we're going to have some extreme wind gusts throughout all of central Northern California today. And then, it will slightly calm down overnight, but unfortunately, we are going to see those extreme wind gusts really stick around Napa and Sonoma in the overnight hours. I know if you live in Napa or Sonoma, that's probably the last thing you want to hear, is we've already had too many fires this season, and some of them due to the extreme wind gusts that we unfortunately often see in these areas. So you can see those extreme wind gusts are really starting to push in right now, part of the reason I wanted to do a live stream forecast, and they're going to be sticking around for quite some time. As we push into Thursday afternoon, you can see this is when the wind gusts really start to peak. If we click in here, you can see that's showing up to 45 to possibly 50 mile per hour wind gusts in some of the drainages and canyons. And just like today, the wind gusts aren't going to be going anywhere. They're just going to be sticking around, especially around the North Complex. I will remind you, the North Complex, as the hotspot map is showing, looks like it's completely out, but it has flared up at one point in the past when I thought we were all good to go. So I am a little bit worried about how these wind gusts and higher temperatures will interact with the North Complex, and I'm certainly not hoping that we're going to have another flare-up. If I had to guess, it's been out for a number of days now, or at least has appeared out on the hotspot map, so I'm actually not too worried that it's going to flare up again. If I'm worried about anything flaring up, it's most likely the August complex, as this was such a large fire, it would have been hard to really mop up all of the smoldering areas, so we'll dive into more of the August complex later with regards to flare-ups. So as you can see, those extreme wind gusts sticking around all of Friday, less extreme towards Napa and Sonoma on Friday, more extreme up towards Chico and Reading, and then finally Friday night working into Saturday morning, we're finally going to see those wind gusts go away. So it's really starting right now and lasting till Friday afternoon. And you can actually see where this red flag warning is in effect, basically from San Jose and the South Bay all the way up to the Oregon border, covering the majority of Northern California. And if you don't know what a red flag warning means, it basically means it's going to be dangerous wildfire conditions, high temperatures, dry air, and extreme wind gusts. As you can see, they're expecting some gusts up to 55 miles per hour. To put that into context, that's what the forecast was saying about a week or two ago when both the Zogg fire and the glass fire started and just blew up overnight. Now, the other thing that you get with a red flag warning is it's easier for fires to start, and then once fires do start, there is the potential that they spread rapidly. And as I kind of teased earlier, there's also the chance of some of our old fires that have previously calmed down flaring back up again. So unfortunately, there is a lot to worry about right now. What I'm hoping is that no new fires start, all our wildfire conditions remain good, nothing new starts, the creek fire doesn't blow up. That's actually an area where we don't see as extreme conditions. If we look at the red flag warning, it doesn't cover where the creek fire is. So ideally, we get through the next 3 days, no new fires start, and as you can see, California, looks beautiful right now. Looking out my window, it's about the nicest it's looked in two months possibly. So it would just be great if no new fires start and we could actually enjoy this nice weather versus fearing the heat. So as you can see, I just mentioned the air quality looking great right now. Let's actually look at the air quality map. And as you can see, it's not showing any unhealthy areas. And I know sometimes I don't trust this map because it has the tendency to underestimate the amount of smoke being produced by our fires, but I would actually agree with this right now. And looking at the satellite imagery, you can see there's not much smoke, and the smoke that is being produced by the creek fire appears to be actually being pushed out by some of the winds moving in. Now looking at the forecast for tomorrow, the forecast for tomorrow right there, it's saying that we're going to be moderate. This is kind of contingent on a few things. This is contingent on no new fires starting, crossing my fingers there, and it also has to do with how much smoke the creek fire produces. So I'm actually predicting in this area, we could actually be seeing some pretty bad air quality, especially in the morning hours. Now the reason I think that has to do with the upper level winds. This is what's responsible for really pushing smoke out of an area. And when you have stronger upper winds, it can push more of the smoke out and you get better air quality. And as you can see, it's looking pretty good right now. But as we move into Thursday morning, the winds above the creek and Castle Fire are going to become extremely weak. So to put in comparison, where you see these reddish and purple colors, that's where winds are strong. These blues and greens are extremely weak. And as you can see, Thursday morning, there is going to be weak winds over the creek and Castle Fires. So I'm not expecting the creek fire to calm down anytime soon for reasons we'll get into in a minute. But when that smoke is produced, these winds are going to allow it to just sit over the area. So I do expect to see some unhealthy air over this area starting probably Thursday morning. Now I just found this new map. I thought I'd share it with you. It is a smoke forecast and it is experimental, so this isn't a guarantee of what's going to happen, but you can see how that smoke being produced by the creek fire as we get into Thursday morning is actually just going to be allowed to sit over the area and actually spread out into the South Bay. So even though this air quality forecast map shows that it's going to be moderate, I'm expecting we could have some unhealthy areas. But I did just want to show this map because it's honestly an amazing graphic for how this smoke is going to behave as those winds are reduced. Now, again, I want to emphasize that we're talking about the upper level winds that push smoke around. When it comes to the lower level winds on the surface, we're going to be seeing some extreme gusts. And I think now would actually be a good time to get into some of our fires. We'll start with the ones creating smoke right now and the ones that are the most active right now. And honestly, the only ones in California that do appear active right now. It is the Castle Fire and the Creek Fire. And as you can see, the Castle Fire does have a little bit of smoke coming off it, although I will say it's looking much better than it has in the past. And we can actually see that on the fire perimeter and hotspot map. If we click in here, I believe that's the Castle Fire right there, and you can see there are two areas that do appear to be actively burning, this northern edge and this northern point right here. But as I said, it's looking a lot better than it has in the past, and it's good to see that this southern edge remains quiet because this is where some of the more populated areas are. So when it comes to the Castle Fire, I'd say we're looking pretty good. It will be interesting to see how this behaves with the warmer temperatures moving in, but the good news with this one is this isn't an area that's going to be seeing those 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, so I'm expecting this fire to maybe increase in behavior a little bit, but not get too extreme. Now when we get to the numbers for the Castle Fire, we are up to 167,000 acres, but we are at 70% containment. The majority of that is on that southern edge where you do see the reduced fire behavior. Now, the fire producing the most smoke in California right now, and the one that does appear to be the most active, is the Creek Fire. And the reasons why this fire has continued are actually pretty interesting, so we'll get into that in a second. First, I just want to show where it's burning and the active hotspots associated with this fire, and it's looking pretty similar to previous days. It's this northeastern edge right here that is really showing a lot of the active hotspots and active fire. Now, we also see some active fire on this eastern finger, although I did receive one report yesterday that some of these hotspots might actually be firefighting operations. So that would be great news there. Basically, if you don't know what that means, is sometimes we actually use fire to fight fire. Now, in like the morning hours or when it's a little bit cooler or less wind, firefighters will actually come in and purposely start some fires to burn out some of the vegetation to basically create a protective barrier around the fire. Now, what that does is when the fire does become more active with warmer temperatures and more wind, it gets to that area where the vegetation has been burned out, and then there's no more fuel for the fire to continue. So it's a pretty cool firefighting tactic that's used to create some good lines around a fire. And I'm hoping that the hotspots in this area are due to those firefighting operations. Now up here, I'm thinking this is actually just wildfire. Main reason I'm thinking that is because that is a lot of hotspots and active fire showing on this map, so I'm not thinking that that would have been set on purpose. Now, there is some good news when it comes to this really active region though. Where you see it burning the most actively on this northern edge right here is actually about to burn into a burn scar. Now, this was the Lions Fire. It happened in 2018, and kind of as I was just saying with the burn operations, what a fire does like this is take out a lot of the vegetation that could fuel the fire. And you can see perfectly how this works. The creek fire perimeter has stopped right as it's gotten into the Lions Fire scar, mainly because there's less fuel for the fire. So this active region that we see down here, as it pushes closer and closer and farther into the scar, we should see it start to calm down. So that's some good news there. And we also have some good news. This entire southern edge and this entire western edge do appear to remain completely calm, no hotspots there, and we do have a large amount of containment on that area of the fire. So that red line represents where it's uncontained. You can see it's where we do still have some of our active fire growth. Hopefully we gain some containment here if those firefighting operations are in fact happening and become successful. But you can see on the western edge of this fire, and you can't see it on this map, but it is true on the southern edge as well, we do have mostly containment. So that's at least some good news there. So I'll go with 2 points of good news, and then we'll get into 2 points of bad news when it comes to the creek fire. 2 points of good news. The first one, I already said it, as this fire moves further into this burn scar, there's going to be less fuel and we'll see reduced behavior. The other good news is you can actually see on this map the changes in terrain. You can see, or not terrain, but vegetation. You can see this green color represents where it's very forested, and then this more grayish white color represents where it's rockier terrain. And you can see a lot of the fire is actually pushing into that more rocky terrain. So what that's going to do is where there's rocks, there's less vegetation and less fuel for the fire. So fuel-wise, we've got 2 things working in our favor with this fire. Now the 2 things not working in our favor, one of them is topography. Now, basically what that means is when you have steep, rugged terrain, like you can kind of see on this map, that steep terrain allows for wildfires to continue no matter what the weather conditions are. Now, the other thing not working in our favor, I know I just said fuel is in our favor when it comes to the burn scar and the rocky terrain, but it's not in our favor when you actually look at what the fuels are. In this area, we have about 80 to 90% of the pine trees have been killed due to bark beetles. And if we click tree mortality, you can actually see Auberry was right around here. You can see that a large majority of the trees in this area have been killed in recent years. So what that allows is just all the dead fuel and timber you need to allow this fire to continue. So that's really the point of what I'm trying to get to. All of our other fires in California with those favorable weekend conditions calm down except the creek fire. And the reason for that is because it wasn't mostly burning due to weather conditions. It was mostly burning due to terrain and tree mortality. Now, if we want to actually see how this might behave over the next 2 days, this is the WRF S-Fire model. It was developed by one of my professors at San Jose State, who I'm lucky enough to work with in the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. And as you can see, this fire isn't exactly expecting all that much intense burning over the next 2 days, but it is predicting some steady growth like we've seen the last week or two with this one. So if we go back to the beginning, take a good look at the fire perimeter, and then go forward 2 days, you can see it is still expecting some growth in that northeastern section. But like I said, as we move more into that burn scar, hopefully that growth will start to calm down. One other good thing to see is that the winds are mostly coming from the northeast. So that's actually good news when it comes to fire behavior, because it will act to push this fire back into itself where it has already burned before. If the winds were coming from the south or the southwest here, then that would be encouraging a lot of active growth in this area. Just some interesting fire weather aspects that I probably am more interested by than majority of people watching, but it's pretty cool stuff when you can actually dive into it and see how it can affect fire growth. Now, when it comes to the numbers for the Creek Fire, we are at 337,000 acres, and like I said, I do expect this one to continue, and we'll see how it gets affected by the conditions. Like I said, not as bad as conditions as Northern California. So we've got 55% containment on this, and when it comes to evacuations, be sure to check the link in the description. In total, there have been 856 structures destroyed with this, although I will say this number hasn't really gone up in the last 2 weeks. So it's good to see that although the fire does remain active, it's not in the really highly populated areas. And we do still have 1,600 personnel, 33 crews, 13 helicopters, 117 engines, 13 dozers, and 40 water tenders. So that's all good news there. There's only 2 spots that remain actively burning, and we do have a lot of resources still on this fire to be able to attack that. Now, when it comes to the weather forecast, like I said, not looking as bad as Northern California, but it's still not ideal. We're going to be increasing in temperature over the next 3 days, getting into the mid-80s on Friday. I would say if I had to sum up the Creek Fire forecast, it's looking moderate. In the past, we've had triple digits, 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and relative humidity in the single digits. You can see over the next 2 days, we're going to be high 70s, low 80s, moderate wind gusts, and humidity never going below 25%. So while it's not ideal, it's looking pretty good, especially when compared with the past. Now, the next fire I want to dive into is the August complex here, because this is the largest wildfire in history of California, and although it significantly calmed down and potentially went out with those favorable weekend conditions where we had low temperatures, high humidity, moderate wind gusts, and even a little bit of rain in this area, I am actually a little worried about this one. So you can see there does appear to be a couple smoky areas remaining with the August complex. And the reason I'm worried about this is because if there is still some smoldering in this area with the high temperatures moving in, the low humidities moving in, and the extreme wind gusts moving in, we could see some of those smoldering areas flare back up. I'm certainly hoping it doesn't happen, but that is something that happened with the North Complex and the Bobcat fire in the past, so I've kind of learned my lesson in not saying that a fire is just completely done. Now, if you're just tuning into this live forecast, I will point out 2 things. One, there is a red flag warning covering from the South Bay all the way up to the Oregon border. This is due to extremely dry conditions and extreme wind gusts reaching up to 50 miles per hour, which is something to worry about because that's not what you want to hear in wildfire season. It could lead to the ignition of some new fires as well as flare up some of our old fires. Now, one other thing I do want to point out, I pointed this out yesterday and I was a little confused about what it was. It was these hot spots showing up between Woodland and Chico. All these little hotspots you see on the map here. And I was actually afraid that we had some new fires starting. But luckily, some of you guys commented in the comment section below that these are actually farmland fires. They're prescribed, they're not wildfire, and for the most part, we don't have to worry about them. So I'm happy to report on that. No new fires popping up in this area. These are actually prescribed farmland fires. All right, so getting back to the August complex, looking at the fire perimeter, one thing I'll point out is it is absolutely massive. Like I said, largest wildfire in the history of California, over 1 million acres burned. It is double the previous record for largest wildfires. And if you were to take this fire perimeter and straighten it out, it would reach past Los Angeles. So I'm really hoping that this one does not flare up again and we can just kiss this fire goodbye. In the past, especially last week, this northern section was extremely active. We had some burning on this northeast section, this little island here, this western portion, and the southern area. And as you can see, with the low temperatures and even a little bit of rain this last weekend, it calmed this fire down, and as of right now, it looks like this fire is out. I can't find any hotspots on this map, so I'm hoping for the best. Hopefully we do not see this one flare up again. But I'll show you why I am a little worried when we get into the weather forecast in a second. Just to go over the numbers, we have burned over 1 million acres with this one, actually well over 1 million acres, but we are at 76% containment, so that's good to see that number continue to go up. Now, as always, even though I say a fire is out and looking good, don't take my word for it. Always be sure to stay updated with the most recent evacuation notices. So in total, there were 54 structures destroyed with this fire. I will say that number hasn't gone up anytime recently, and it especially hasn't gone up in the last 4 days, as this fire has basically appeared out for quite some time now. Now, when it comes to personnel, we still have 1,500 personnel on this, 31 crews, 7 helicopters, 172 engines, 25 dozers, and 27 water tenders. So while the weather forecast is honestly looking about as bad as it could be, the fact that this fire has been basically out for a few days now and we have this many personnel still on the fire, they've most likely been able to get into some of the smoldering areas and do some good mop up to make sure this fire is out before these conditions really push in. So now it's time to actually get into those conditions, and I'll mostly make this for the August complex, but it's basically going to be true for all of Northern California, and I'll actually zoom out so that we can get an overall picture of what's going on for anyone who's just tuning in to the live stream. So as you can see, some of those extreme wind gusts have already started to build in. That's part of the reason I wanted to do a live stream. The bad wildfire conditions are starting right now. So looking at the wind gusts, that's in maybe the 30 to 35 mile per hour range. And unfortunately, as we get into Thursday afternoon, we're actually going to see these wind gusts increase. So that's why I'm worried about the August complex here. When you get wind gusts mixed with high temperatures, low humidity, it could flare this fire back up like we saw with the North complex and the Bobcat fire. And as you can see, this is extreme wind gusts. This is pretty close to what we saw when the Zogg fire and the glass fire blew up. If we click in here, you can see 45 miles per hour, possibly 50. That's the reason we have a red flag over the majority of Northern California. The other reason has to do with the humidity. Extremely dry, possibly into the single digits and low teens in some places. So honestly, I'm pretty worried about the next few days, but I'm just hoping we can get through it. So I'll just go back to the wind gust there because I didn't really show how it was going to progress throughout right now all the way through Friday. The wind gusts are basically going to be sticking around for the next 3 days, getting rather extreme at some points in the afternoon and even in the overnight hours in some places. Like I said, 40 to possibly 55 miles per hour in some places. And then we're finally going to see them calm down early Saturday morning. Now, if we go back and look at the temperatures, especially in the August complex area that we've been talking about, temperatures are going to be in the high 80s to low 90s today. Then tomorrow, we're going to be possibly into the mid 90s. And then Friday, this is actually looking worse than it has in the past, getting into the mid to possibly high 90s throughout Northern California. And then, like I said, humidity-wise, possibly getting into the single digits, which is not what we want to see. So overall, conditions looking extremely challenging for Northern California. Part of the reason we have this red flag warning. Now, I've gone over the weather conditions. I've gone over the 2 fires I'm the most worried about. I'd like to end with some good news. Let's end by looking at some of the fires that appear completely out, and I'm not worried about flaring back up again because they've been out for over a week now. One of those is the Zogg fire, and I'm happy to say this has officially been finalized 100% containment, so that is going to stay at 56,000 acres. Now, the other fire in this area that I'm happy to report on is the North Complex. And although this did flare up the last time I said we're looking good, right now there are absolutely no hotspots remaining, and it's looked like this for quite some time now, so I don't expect this to flare up again. You know what, right as I said that, I saw this one little hotspot there. Hopefully we get in and put that out by the time I finish this live stream. So looking at the North Complex, I will just, if we zoom in here, you can roughly see where the containment is. That black line represents where it's contained, and that little red area is where it is still uncontained. And I also wanted to show this because you can see the numbers. We're up to 94% containment, really just that very northwest section that's uncontained. And I'm not expecting this to go anywhere, so we're likely going to stay around 319,000 acres. Now, another fire where we do have some good news is with the glass fire. Haven't seen any hotspots with this one for quite some time now. Not expecting it to increase or flare back up again, so likely going to stay around 67,000 acres, and we're likely to see 100% containment hopefully in the next day or two. You know what, one thing I will say, because that little hotspot on the North Complex is actually kind of bugging me that came out of nowhere, that might actually be a firefighting operation. They might be actually coming in here, burning out some of the vegetation just to guarantee that we don't see any flare-ups and remove some of the danger in that area. We'll leave it at that. Hopefully that's what that hotspot is. Again, don't take my word on it though. That's just me trying to hope for the best and spread some positivity. Now, the last one we will look at is a fire that we've talked a lot about in the past, and this one is looking good. And just like the North Complex, this one has flared up in the past, but there's been no hotspots on it for a number of days now, so I don't expect the Bobcat fire to flare back up again. So that one is likely going to stay around 116,000 acres. So I guess I'll end this live stream just by doing a quick summary of what's going on and then a quick summary of the overall California 2020 season. Over the next 3 days, we're going to be getting into the mid to high 90s. Relative humidity is going to be dropping into possibly the single digits to the low teens, and we're going to be seeing some wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. All of that is the recipe for some very dangerous wildfire conditions, so I am worried about some new fires starting, and I'm also worried about some of our old fires flaring back up again. Now, I certainly hope that this does not happen, and hopefully no new fires start, and we just get to actually enjoy this warm weather versus fearing it. Now, when it comes to the overall 2020 season, I've said this before, it is the worst wildfire season in recorded history, over 4 million acres burned, and as you can see with the forecast right now, wildfire season is far from over. Historically, some of our worst fires are actually in October and November, so I hate to say it, but we do have a long ways to go. However, I'm going to be here with you guys every single step of the way, and you know, although it has been bad in the past, we are going to make it through. We always do. So, as always, thank you to CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service for all the amazing work you do. Thank you to San Jose State, Dr. Craig Clements and Adam Kochansky for teaching me everything I know about wildfire. And if you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. And I'll just end it by saying, good luck to California. I'm hoping for the best, crossing my fingers. Let's hope the next 3 days go by without anything to worry about. So thank you for watching, and have a good day.